Love your enemy. Is that even possible? Can it be done? David did it in the first reading. I don't know if you caught that story, but King Saul is after him. He has come in search for David, wants to kill him because Saul is convinced that David was going to take the throne away from him. And David has an opportunity to kill Saul, end it all, and become king. David won't do it. He chooses to love Saul and chooses not to kill him when he had the opportunity. What about you and me? Is it possible for us in our day and age to be like David, to love our enemies? I actually think this is possible. I think it is actually a lot easier than you might think. And it starts with sort of a basic principle, if you will, a basic strategy. You absolutely must, separate the person from the thing that is causing you to dislike them. Whether that's their viewpoint about an issue or whether it's something they have done. You must keep those two things separate. And we don't always do that. Often we will say, oh, this person is, and then we'll give them a label. We'll say like, well, my Aunt Matilda is pro-choice. Is, if you remember from your math class, is like an equal sign. And when we say that, we're basically saying, my Aunt Matilda is this viewpoint. And of course, I don't agree with the viewpoint, and so it's hard to love the viewpoint, but that's not what God's asking me to do. God is asking me to love the person. And so I'll do a lot better if I think of it this way. If I say, this person is a child of God who happens to hold an opinion that I don't agree with. Now I'm in a position to love the person and not care, not love, not agree with their viewpoint. And I also then don't have to get caught up in all this stuff about, oh, well, if I'm seen talking to them, then people will think that I agree with their viewpoint. No, I'm talking to them because they're a child of God. They are worthy of a conversation. The fact that I don't agree with them, that's something different. I want to keep them separate. That's what David did. David, if you caught the phrase, he referred to Saul as the Lord's anointed. God picked Saul to be king. The Lord's anointed, in essence, as we would use the phrase, a child of God. Sure, Saul wants to kill David. That's not good, but that's not who Saul is. And so David is expressing an act of love. That is an action that shows goodness to Saul by not killing him. Would he have liked to have not been hunted down as he was being hunted? Absolutely. But David knows that he's charged to be good to the Lord's anointed. One of the things that you and I are going to have to do is be aware of the fact that we have so many people in so many voices in our lives that are not teaching us to love our enemies. I mean, does anybody have a story of a news broadcast where they were teaching you to love your enemy, especially a cable news station? No, these people are teaching us to hate, and we're going to have to be careful to filter them out, maybe turn them off. And if you want a terrific example of that, I got this in the mail a couple of weeks ago. This is from an organization called Priests for Life. I don't know a great deal about them, but I assume from their title it's an organization of priests who are advocates for pro-life causes. This is the second sentence of their newsletter. As patriots, we rejoice that the 2024 election has literally saved us from a political party that hates America. If you are shocked by that, you should be. Because first of all, it's a lie. There are lots of people in here that are registered people of the party that he's talking about, and I can't imagine that any of you hate America. So he's lying. He's doing everything, the writer of that's doing everything he can to make sure that he's putting his opponents in the worst possible light. In no way, shape, or form is he treating people that he disagrees with as children of God. They're his enemies, and he is going to do everything he can to defeat them. And that's wrong. It's a sin. That is exactly what it is. It is a sin. He's lying, and he is disobeying a clear command of the Lord. That's what you and I have to avoid. And if that means we have to turn off a TV station, we have to change the radio station, if, in my case, you need to quit reading this, I stopped after I read that sentence, and then I wrote them a note asking them, how is it that you represent me, or at least you purport to represent me, and then do this? In what way does that sentence show love to an enemy? I don't know if I'll get an answer back. I'd like to. Love to see what they would say. As I said a moment ago, this is hard, but we have to try. We just have to try, and I can give you a good story about this. Some of you might remember 3 years ago, the Supreme Court was wrestling with the Dobbs decision, Roe versus Wade, the overturning of that. And if you may remember, the opinion, draft of the opinion was leaked to the press. And shortly thereafter that, became aware that there was a possibility the protesters might organize protests out in front of Catholic churches. So I began getting some emails about this, about what I should do should some protesters show up in front of my parish. Some of that was very helpful, especially the parts from the secular organizations that were trying to be helpful, explaining to me what I was legally allowed to do. Mostly, though, I was struck by the things that came from the religious organizations. Because with one tiny exception, nobody was trying to wrestle with the question of how would you show love to protesters who showed up in front of your church. That one exception, by the way, was an email that said, before you tell them that they're trespassing and you throw them off the property, offer them a bottle of water. But otherwise, nothing. And indeed, later that week, I overheard a conversation between a group of priests who were talking about the very issue, and no single statement, not a hint of that conversation was anything about trying to love these people. But I had been wrestling with this, and so I took it to the Lord, and the deal was, what can I do? And I'll tell you what I would have done. I did not get the opportunity. They were smart protesters. Rather than coming to my little place, if they were going to go anywhere, they would have gone a couple miles away to the cathedral and the bishop. That would have been better for them. But what I would have done, if they had given me the chance, I was going to walk right up to them and look at them and just say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Because even though I don't agree with your position, I know that this decision, if it comes down the way the draft suggests, it's going to be hurtful to you, and you're hurting, and I'm sorry about that. And that was all I was going to do, and I was just going to wait and see what happened. I don't know how that would have turned out. My parish might have accused me of befriending the enemy. They might have been upset that I went over and talked to them. I don't even know if they would have been receptive. I don't even know if I could have communicated what was really in my heart the right way. People might have misunderstood it. But I would have done one thing that I thought was important, and that was I tried. I tried. I was going to try to show love to my enemies, even if I didn't do it particularly well. And that is my admonition to you. You just have got to take this seriously. This is a command of the Lord. And despite the fact that all the news and so many things that you and I see and read are telling us to ignore Jesus, we do not want to do that. Jesus, as he is about everything else, he's right about this. We need to at least try to love our enemies.